promised, some years ago I made a wager and I promised to report before the lunch how the wager was coming out. And I've been doing that regularly, but it probably seems appropriate, since it's developed this far, to point out a rather obvious lesson, which was what I hoped to drive home to some degree by offering to make the wager originally. Incidentally, when I offered to make the wager, namely that somebody could pick out 5 hedge funds and I would take the unmanaged S&P index used by Vanguard Fund, and I would bet that over a 10-year period that the unmanaged index would beat these 5 funds that were all being managed, presumably. They could pick any 5 funds that were managed by people who were charging incredible sums to people because of their supposed expertise. And fortunately, there's an organization called, or at least if you go to the internet, if you put in longbets.org, it's a terribly interesting website. You can have a lot of fun with it because people take the opposite side of various propositions that have a long tail to them and make bets as to the outcome, and then they both give each side gives their reasons. And you can go to that website and you can find bets about, what population will be doing 15 years from now, or all kinds of things. And our bet became quite famous on there. A fellow I like, who I didn't know before this, Ted Seides, bet that he could pick out 5 hedge funds. These were funds of funds. In other words, there was one hedge fund at the top, and then that manager picked out who he thought were the best managers underneath, and then bought into these other funds in turn, so that the 5 funds of funds represent maybe 100 or 200 hedge funds underneath. Now bear in mind that the hedge fund, the fellow making the bet, was picking out funds where the manager on top was getting paid perhaps 0.5% a year, plus a cut of the profits, for merely picking out who he thought were the best managers underneath, who in turn were getting paid maybe 1.5 or 2%, plus a cut of the funds on profits. But certainly the guy at the top was incentivized to try and pick out great funds, and at the next level, those people were presumably incentivized too. So the result is, after 8 years, and several hundred hedge fund managers being involved, is that now the totally unmanaged fund by Vanguard, with very, very, very minimal costs, is now 40-some points ahead of the group of hedge funds. Now that may sound like a terrible result for the hedge funds, but it's not a terrible result for the hedge fund managers. These managers, you've got this top level manager that's charging probably 0.5%, I don't know that for sure. And down below, you've got managers that are probably charging 1.5 to 2%. So if you have a couple percentage points sliced off every year, that is a lot of money. We have 2 managers at Berkshire that each manage $9 billion for us. They both ran hedge funds before. If they had a 2-and-20 arrangement with Berkshire, which is not uncommon in the hedge fund world, they would be getting $180 million each, merely for breathing annually. It's a compensation scheme that is unbelievable to me. And that's one reason I made this bet. But what I'd like you to do is for a moment imagine that in this room, we have you people own all of America. All the stocks in America are owned by this group. You are the Berkshire 18,000 or whatever it is that have somehow managed to accumulate all the wealth in the country. And let's assume we just divide it down the middle. And on this side, we put half the people, half of all the investment capital in the world. And that capital is what a certain presidential candidate might call low energy. In fact, they have no energy at all. They buy half of everything that exists in the investment world, 50%, everyone on this side. And so now half of it is owned by these no energy people. They don't look at stock prices. They don't turn on business channels. They don't read the Wall Street Journal. They don't do anything. They are a slovenly group that just sits for year after year after year owning half of the country, half of America's business. Now, what's their result going to be? their result is going to be exactly average as how American business does, because they own half of all of it. They have no expenses, no nothing. Now, what's going to happen with the other half? The other half are what we call the hyperactives. And the hyperactives, their gross result is also going to be half, right? They can't, the whole has to be the sum of the parts here, and this group by definition can't change from its half of the ultimate investment results. This half is going to have the same gross results. They're going to have the same results as the no energy people. And they're also going to have terrific expenses, because they're all going to be moving around, hiring hedge funds, hiring consultants, paying lots of commissions and everything. And that half as a group has to do worse than this half. The people who don't do anything have to do better than the people that are trying to do better. I mean, that's simple. And I hoped through making this bet to actually create a little example of that. But that offer was open to anybody.